prisoners of conscience in China have been released. Thank you.
Let me quickly figure out my schedule here a second. So sorry. Next up, I would like to invite Carl Gershman. Mr. Gershman has served as the president for the National Endowment for Democracy, an organization that has been at the forefront of empowering oppressed peoples to secure their fundamental rights. Yet again, with Mr. Gershman, we have an individual who has advocated for human rights for decades. For years, he has worked with diverse Chinese populations of people persecuted for their beliefs, including the Christians, Uyghurs, and Tibetan Buddhists, among others. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, and what a terrific pleasure it is to be here with Frank Wolf, and I just want to thank Frank Wolf for his continued leadership in the struggle for human rights. He's just one of our, really a national treasure, a great American. We're very happy that Liu Jia has been released from prison, but we can never forget how much she has suffered at the hands of the Chinese regime and how her husband, her beloved husband Liu Xiaobo, was taken from her, sentenced to 11 years in prison for the crime of advocating constitutional democracy and the rule of law, which they called the subversion of state power, denied medical treatment, and ultimately forced to die a martyr's death. They feared Liu Xiaobo because he understood and could explain to the Chinese people the regime's lies and vulnerabilities, its lack of political legitimacy, because this is a regime that has never been freely elected, its need to stoke nationalism, to fill the void, the ideological void left by the death of communism, and the way it has poisoned the spirit of the nation by promoting what Liu called the class struggle thinking and an enemy mentality. And he especially understood what the danger that the Chinese regime posed to democracy in China and around the world. He coined the phrase that it was a blood transfusion machine for the world's dictatorships, aiding these dictatorships. And in an essay that he wrote in 2006, he warned that if China continued to rise as a dictatorship, the way Hitler's Germany did, and the Meiji emperors in Japan and Stalin's Soviet Union had done in the last century, the result would not only be a catastrophe for the Chinese people, but a disaster for the spread of liberal democracy in the world. No one listened to him back then in 2006 because the conventional wisdom at the time was that the foreign policy of the foreign policy establishment was that the growth of economic growth of China was a good thing because it would ultimately encourage liberalization as it did elsewhere in East Asia. But China's growth has had the opposite effect in reinforcing Beijing's belief in the legitimacy of its state-driven economic model. In addition, it has provided the regime with resources that it could use to play a much more assertive role internationally with the Belt and Road Initiative and other initiatives that it has undertaken in the South China Sea and elsewhere. The Economist magazine reflected the breakdown of the old consensus when it bluntly declared in March, after Xi Jinping announced his intention to remain in power indefinitely, that the West's 25-year bet on China has failed. But Liu Xiaobo never made that bet because he understood the nature of the Chinese regime. And we're now trying to figure out how to deal with this new and more threatening China. Liu Xiaobo's central message to us was that we should never give up on the Chinese people and on the capacity for change in China. That has to be our objective. And it's because they fear an awakening Chinese population that they had to adopt document number 9 in 2013, which warned against any discussion of constitutional democracy, universal values, free media, the rule of law, and what they call historical nihilism, meaning any honest discussion of the crimes of the Communist Party and Mao, such as the Cultural Revolution and the Great Leap Forward when tens of millions of people died. Liu understood these things and he could explain them. And despite the great control that the Chinese regime is trying to exercise today through the surveillance state and the use of facial recognition technology, he understood that The critical factor was that the Chinese people were no longer living in fear the way they once did. In another essay that he wrote in 2006, he said that dissidents could no longer be cowed into submission by the repressive regime. Political persecution can still bring economic loss and the loss of personal freedom, but it can no longer destroy a person's reputation or turn a person into a political leper. Indeed, today, he wrote, it can have the opposite effect, not merely failing to destroy one's dignity or spirit, but actually helping a person to achieve spiritual wholeness, and even in the view of others, to rise to the status of conscience of the people and hero of truth. And Liu Xiaobo did become, through the persecution by the Chinese regime, did become a hero of truth. He said that, he wrote that even the most vicious tyranny, will be short-lived the moment the people decide to oppose it to the bitter end. There are people in China who have such determination, and their numbers could grow if the alarm over China's belligerence persuades the world's democracies that defending democrats in China is consistent not just with our values, but with our interests as well. This was Liu's central message, that our freedom is linked to his, and by extension to freedom in China. In remembering Liu Xiaobo, we are reaffirming and defending our common future. Thank you.
Appointed of this year. He was also voted unanimously to be the chairman of the commission. He is a prominent translator of Tibetan and Buddhist works and has served as the translator for the Dalai Lama as well. So we are grateful to have him here with us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very Honorable former Congressman Frank Wolf, and earlier Honorable Jim McGovern also spoke, and he adopted Panchen Lama as his prisoners of conscience along with me. And good afternoon, everyone here. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Tenzin Dorje, Chair of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, or USCIRF. USCIRF's mission is to elevate and promote international religious freedom. We monitor and report on religious freedom conditions abroad and make policy recommendations to the U.S. government. Advocating for prisoners of conscience has been a high priority for USCIRF since our creation nearly 20 years ago. Last year, USCIRF launched our Religious Prisoners of Conscience project to raise attention to prisoners of conscience. Each USCIRF commissioner advocates for one or two specific individuals from different faiths or no faith who have been unjustly imprisoned for exercising the fundamental right to religious freedom. I would like to tell you about two Chinese prisoners of conscience. As a Tibetan American born in Tibet and raised in India after fleeing communist China's invasion, it is my privilege to advocate for Panchen Lama Gendun Church in Nyima. In 1995, His Holiness the Dalai Lama selected Gendun as 11th Panchen Lama, the second highest position in Tibetan Buddhism. Days later, Chinese authorities abducted then 6-year-old Gendun and his family. The Chinese government has held him hostage most of his life. The Panchen Lama is now 29, but we do not know his location, health, or ability to pursue his religious studies. I'm also honored to advocate for Gulmira Imen, a Uyghur Muslim imprisoned since 2009. She is from the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, where today an estimated 1 million Uyghurs languish in extra-legal detention camps. Gulmira's only so-called crime was acting as a courageous defender of her fellow Uyghurs. For her advocacy, she was sentenced to life in prison. Gulmira and the Panchen Lama are the only two of many prisoners of conscience in China whom we cannot and must not forget. As you can see, there are more pictures here, Tashi Wangchuk, and we have Jiang Tianyong and the Wang Huangchang, and many more. USCIRF commissioners will continue to raise the cases of religious prisoners of conscience in China and around the globe. We take on this responsibility to help those who are powerless against repressive governments. Your participation today signals that You too are a part of this fight. I thank you for your willingness to help, and I thank 21st Century Wilberforce for gathering us in solidarity. And I also want to express my great respect and appreciation to the late Nobel laureate Liu Xiaobo and his wife Lucia, who I saw that amazing picture of her being free. And of course, that was a momentary happiness for us because there are many more prisoners of conscience still in China. So let's stand together and let's all work together to set them all free. Thank you very much for your attention.
The cords are a little dangerous up here. Next, I would like to invite up Pastor Wang Dao. He is with China Aid. Bob Fu was unable to join us today, so Pastor Wang graciously came along instead to speak with us today. He is someone who has experienced firsthand the injustices of the repressive Chinese government in his over 10 detentions. In a space of 2 years, his house church was forced to move over 10 times to avoid suppression. His church was also subject to arbitrary searches and illegal repossession of property. Pastor Dao, thank you for using your freedom to continue to speak out for those who are still imprisoned.
尊敬的议员、同事和朋友们，
Honored members of Congress, colleagues, and friends.
我叫王导牧师，曾经是中国的良心犯。
My name is Pastor Wang Dao, and I am a former prisoner of conscience in China.
2天前，我们得到一个振奋人心的好消息：刘晓波先生的妻子刘霞女士获准离开中国，我们真的很为她高兴。
We are all very happy for Mrs. Liu Xia, wife of Liu Xiaobo, being granted permission to leave China 2 days ago.
刘先生的死亡是世界的不幸，关押刘霞则是巨大的错误。中国政府正面回应国际社会的关切，这是朝正确的方向迈出了一小步。
The death of her husband was a tragic loss for the world. The detention of Ms. Liu Xia was a major mistake of China government. But by releasing her in response to international concerns, China government is taking its first step in the right direction on the topic of human rights.
然而，任意关押良心犯的情况不容乐观。就在昨天，64岁的秦永明先生被武汉市中院重判13年刑期，累计入狱35年。有数据核实，近800位中国的良心人士，仅因为顺应良心说话，或实践某种思想及宗教，以及遭到酷刑折磨、囚禁，甚至非正常死亡。
Yesterday, however, the conditions of prisoners of conscience faced are still very dismal. Yesterday, the 64-year-old Mr. Qin Yongming was sentenced to 13 years in prison by the Wuhan Municipal Intermediate Court. That means he will be in prison for 35 years in total by the end of his imprisonment. According to reliable statistics, roughly 800 dissidents have been tortured, imprisoned, even death due to unknown reasons, all because they chose to exercise their beliefs and convictions.
2016年5月，在中国西南省份四川，4位年轻人因为出品89649，以每瓶售价89.64元的标价，被以3颠罪起诉，无从解释。莫非是检方相信酒有一股神奇的魔力，足以颠覆一个国家的政权？
In May 2016, 4 young people were charged with inciting subversion of state power for selling alcoholic drinks labeled 8964, implying the protest of Tiananmen on June the 4th of 1989, at the price of $89.64. This is ridiculous. Do prosecutors truly believe that the magic power of alcohol is capable of subverting the state power?
今年4月份，新疆哈萨克族女医生卢尔古丽，在她住所的小区门口 看到店主将猪肉和羊肉混在一起卖。你知道穆斯林对猪肉是忌口的，他问对方为何把清真食品与猪肉混合出售，几个便衣随即带走他。3个月后，他被判刑入狱16年，入狱3天便死亡。
In April of 2018, Noor Guli, a female doctor from Kazakh ethnic group of the Xinjiang province, was arrested by the undercover police when she pointed out that her local meat store was violating Muslim customs by selling both pork and lamb. 3 months later, she was sentenced to 16 years in prison. 3 days into her sentence, she was found dead.
这些消息骇人听闻，令人难以置信，但却是千真万确。
News like these, too, are shocking and hard to believe, but they do actually happen.
对华援助协会2017年度报告显示，超过20万的基督徒受到政府的干扰。对华援助协会特设中国18栏目，象征对良心人士的高度关注。目前已有8位出狱，10位仍在狱中。
The 2017 annual report of China Aid indicates that more than 200,000 Christians were harassed and persecuted. China Aid has set up the China 18 campaign to raise concerns and to advocate for 18 prisoners of conscience. Among these 18 Chinese citizens, 8 have been released, but 10 are still in prison.
我们也严重关切含冤济狱的牧师曹三强、律师江天勇、周世峰、王全章、王炳章博士、胡石根长老、伊利哈木教授等等等等。
In addition, we would like to express our serious concerns for those who have also suffered wrongful charges and imprisonment. Pastor Zhang, Cao Sanqiang, Attorney Jiang Tianyong, Zhou Shifeng, Wang Quanzhang, Dr. Wang Bingzhang, Mr. Hu Shigen, Professor Ili Hamu, etc.
良心犯一个也嫌多，只要世界还有良心犯，我们就不应该就此问题抛诸脑后。
Prisoner of conscience should not exist. As long as there is a single prisoner of conscience in the world, we should not ignore this problem.
善待公民是每一个国家赖以生存的基石。中共政府没有遵守国际相关的人权公约与准则，也不履行其本国宪法，不兑现人权承诺。
Treating her citizens fairly and justly is the foundation of a nation. Chinese government does not follow international human rights norms and guidelines, nor does she follow her own constitution and human rights commitment in her citizens.
过去30年，我们的合作伙伴设立了良心犯项目，其努力成果可歌可泣。但长期而言，从个案的救济转换到制度性消除良心犯，更应该成为当前国际社会的共识。对华援助协会愿与同仁们一道努力，以促成中国零良心犯的神圣远景。
For the last 30 years, our partners have set up the campaign for prisoners of conscience. Their efforts are inspiring, moving, and worthy of praises. But the long-term goal and consensus for international community should go beyond the rescue of individual cases to systematically making prisoner of conscience extinct. China Aid is committed to maintaining its unceasing effort for the vision of zero prisoner of conscience.
良心与生俱来，是造物主在人性上打下他神圣形象的烙印。良心成为我们的益友与行万事的准则，这样我们便可知道风向，从而扬帆远航。
Conscience is imprinted by the Creator on human beings created according to His image. Conscience serves as our best friend and our life guidance so that we can soar with wind.
愿上帝保佑中国的良心犯，愿良心引导我们每一个人， 谢谢大家。
May God bless all prisoners of conscience in China, and may our conscience continue to guide us. Thank you.
Next up, we would like to invite Senator Ted Cruz, who has joined us. It is an honor to have him here with us today. He has served the great state of Texas since 2013, and we are grateful to have him advocating for the release of Liu Xia and her late husband, Liu Xiaobo. In addition to introducing a bill calling for Liu Xia's freedom, Senator Cruz delivered multiple speeches on the Senate floor to call attention to Dr. Liu's plight and human rights abuses in communist China. He has also led the fight to free Liu Xiaobo, introducing a bill to rename the street in front of the Chinese embassy after Liu Xiaobo, the Liu Xiaobo Plaza. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. We stand here today in support of freedom. We stand here today in support of life. We stand here today in support of the fundamental human right that every man and woman and child deserves. A right to recognize that each life is a precious gift from God. That government should not be in the business of murdering its citizens. That government should not be in the business of torturing its citizens. For far too long, the People's Republic of China has committed human rights abuse after human rights abuse after human rights abuse. Murder, torture, a state policy of forced abortions that is a crime against women and a crime against humanity. And yet we stand here today also reflecting on the power of truth, on the power of light and sunshine. Communist dictatorships fear the truth. Communist dictatorships fear light and scrutiny because their evil flourishes in darkness. We stand here today celebrating that Liu Xia has finally been released, that she is out of imprisonment, she is free. And I will say that is a testament to the men and women here, that is a testament to millions of voices across America, across China, across the world, who spoke out against her unjust imprisonment, who spoke out against the unjust imprisonment of her late husband, Liu Xiaobo. Liu Xiaobo awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his relentless clarity, shining light on the practices of the PRC, bringing attention where the government didn't want attention focused. I was proud to introduce legislation to rename the street in front of the Chinese embassy after Liu Xiaobo. Now that is a particular strategy that follows what Ronald Reagan and the United States did successfully during the Cold War with regard to the Soviet Union. And in particular, in the 1980s, under President Reagan's leadership, we renamed the street in front of the Soviet embassy after the famed Russian dissident Sakharov. Now, the effect of it, some might say, is minor. After all, what difference can a street sign make? But that street sign means that any time the embassy is giving directions to how to get there, they have to acknowledge that brave and courageous dissident. Anytime you go in modern days to the website to find out where might the embassy be, they're forced to acknowledge the brave and courageous dissident. Anytime someone writes a piece of mail that they want to get to the embassy, They have to write the name of that dissident. And I go back to where I started before. That what tyranny fears most is light and truth and exposure. I'm proud to say the legislation I introduced to rename the street in front of the Chinese embassy passed the United States Senate unanimously. Republicans and Democrats standing together. And I can tell you right now, the government of the PRC was none too pleased. Indeed, they have repeatedly, over and over and over again, raised with the United States State Department that this effort to rename the street is highly worrisome to them, highly bothersome to them. And I will tell you what I have consistently told, what I've told former Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, what I've told current Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, is you can tell them if they don't want to see this legislation pass both houses of Congress, if they don't want to see the street sign go up, release Liu Xia. Talk's cheap. They acted too slowly to release Liu Xiaobo. And he died in their captivity. But I will tell you, the concerted effort of shining a light is why Liu Xia has been released. Now, that does not suggest that we collectively should cease our efforts. It does not suggest that we're done. Rather, it should encourage us to redouble our efforts. Because what released Liu Xia was not an aircraft carrier pulling up along the Chinese coast. It was not tanks rolling across the border. It was not billions of dollars. It was simply light and truth. That light and truth is powerful. It is what each and every one of us are engaged in doing, shining the light and speaking the voice of human freedom. Tyranny hates inconvenient truths. Some time ago, when I was in Jerusalem, I had the opportunity to visit with Natan Sharansky, the famed Soviet dissident who spent years and years in the Gulag. He described how the prisoners in the Gulag would pass message from cell to cell. Did you hear what President Reagan said? Evil empire, ash heap of history. Tear down this wall. The words we say here are heard far beyond one lawn in Washington, D.C. They're heard in darkened prison cells. They're heard by those facing unspeakable agony and torture. And the words in support of freedom give hope, give solace, give encouragement to those being persecuted, but they also spread fear in their captors. We are here today in defense of justice. And I am deeply honored. I am humbled to stand alongside you. God bless you.
Privileged to work with Elise in Congressman Wolf's office on the Hill. She worked for him for many years as well, so it is really my honor to have her up here today. She is going to be reading a statement from Senator Rubio, who was unable to be here in person today, but who was kind enough to ask Elise to come in his place. So thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you, Abby. Good to be with you all. As Abby mentioned, Senator Rubio is the current chair of the Congressional Executive Commission on China, and he regrets that he could not be here today, but asked me to come in his stead and read this statement. Good afternoon to those of you gathered on the East Lawn of the U.S. Capitol in an expression of solidarity with the thousands of political and religious prisoners unjustly held by the Chinese government and Communist Party in clear violation of their basic human rights. I have the privilege of chairing the Bipartisan Congressional Executive Commission on China alongside human rights champion Congressman Chris Smith. When the commission was established in 2000, the prevailing wisdom underpinning U.S.-China relations, embraced by Republican and Democrat administrations alike, maintained that increased trade and economic interconnectivity, as well as diplomacy and robust cultural exchange, would lead to greater openness and political liberalization within China. In the years that followed, a wealthier and more entrenched Chinese Communist Party has emerged, committed to preserving its monopoly on power through state-sponsored repression, surveillance, and propaganda. The Chinese government's human rights violations and disregard for the rule of law most directly affects the Chinese people, as evidenced by the more than 1,300 active cases of political and religious prisoners contained in the Commission's political prisoner database. The Commission's annual report painstakingly documents rights violations in ethnic minority regions, religious freedom violations, harassment of rights defenders and lawyers, suppression of free speech, onerous restrictions on civil society, and more, all of which are the markings of a repressive, one-party state. I'm especially troubled by the deteriorating human rights situation in Xinjiang, where Uyghur Muslims and other ethnic minorities have been subject to arbitrary arrest, egregious restrictions on religious practice and culture, a digitized surveillance system so pervasive that every aspect of daily life is monitored, and mass political re-education centers where as many as 500,000 to 1 million people have been or are currently detained. If this situation doesn't merit application of global Magnitsky sanctions, I don't know what does. China's authoritarianism at home and its increasing willingness to export it abroad directly threatens our most deeply held values and national interests. Many in the China human rights community were understandably heartened by the news this week that after 8 long solitary years confined to her home by the Chinese government, Liu Xia, the widow of Nobel Peace Prize laureate and pro-democracy advocate Liu Xiaobo, is finally free. Her unjust and illegal confinement rightly prompted sustained advocacy from the international community, including many of you gathered here, and her freedom was secured as a result of those efforts. Anyone who tells you that statements, resolutions, rallies, letters, and other forms of public advocacy on behalf of those who have been persecuted or otherwise silenced by repressive authoritarian governments is pointless need look no further than this case. Our efforts don't always, or often, yield the outcomes we desire, but persist we must. Time and again, dissidents and former political prisoners from China and around the world who I meet with echo the same refrain. When America spoke out, it gave us strength. We knew we weren't forgotten. We were treated more humanely by our captors. And of course, the reverse holds true. When the United States fails to champion human rights and religious freedom as foundational to our foreign policy and inextricably linked to our national interests, we risk sending the message that injustice will be met with impunity, cries for help will fall on deaf ears, and chains will triumph over change. Several of the obituaries and tributes following the untimely death in captivity of Liu Xiaobo 1 year ago tomorrow noted his pivotal decision in 1989 to leave behind a fellowship at Columbia University in New York and return to China to join the blossoming pro-democracy protests in Tiananmen Square. What began as hopeful calls for change, drawing thousands of Chinese citizens to the streets, ended in bloodshed 30 years ago next June. But the story did not end there. In the ensuing years, Liu Xiaobo's moral leadership and political commentary, including through periods of detention and imprisonment, maintained the hopes of Chinese citizens in China and in exile who believe in freedom and political reform. His advocacy of free expression demonstrated his fierce support to critical and independent thinking. His leadership in drafting and enlisting signatories of Charter 08 showed his willingness to publicly voice his beliefs and inspire others. His poetry, in which he expressed his love and respect for his wife, revealed his depth of spirit and character. In his Nobel lecture delivered in absentia, Liu Xiaobo predicted that, quote, China's political progress will not stop, and I, filled with optimism, look forward to the advent of a future free China, for there is no force that can put an end to the human quest for freedom, and China will in the end become a nation ruled by law where human rights reign supreme. end quote. I share this conviction. Liu Xia and countless others whose cases we highlight today have paid a great price in pursuit of this end. But we must remember that history is not on the side of tyrants or oppressors. The ash heap of history is littered with authoritarian governments who could no longer suppress the universal aspirations of their people. Months after the Tiananmen Square massacre, the Berlin Wall came down, and with it, the Soviet Union. The tides of history often move swiftly, and I pray for the day in our lifetime when Liu Xiaobo's manifold contributions are properly recognized and his dream realized in the land of his birth. Thank you.
Thank you, Elise, very much for coming out today, and please thank Senator Rubio for his statement as well. Next, I would like to ask Sophie Richardson to come up. Sophie Richardson is one of those people where every time you have a meeting about China here in DC, everybody asks, have you talked to Sophie Richardson yet? So it really is my privilege to ask or have her here with us today. She currently serves as the director of she serves as the China director at Human Rights Watch. She is a leading expert on the Chinese government's human rights abuses, and she provides commentary for sources such as BBC, CNN, NPR, and Foreign Policy. Dr. Richardson is a fierce advocate for political reform in China and across Asia, and we are thrilled to have her expertise with us today. So thank you, Sophie, for being here.
It's lovely to be here this afternoon, and I would like to start by thanking Mr. Frank Wolf, who taught me everything I know about how to be an advocate, and who I think has set a high bar for all of us in our work. I know we were supposed to bring pictures this afternoon of people who remain in prison. I have to say, I find this photograph irresistible, particularly as a symbol of hope, and as what we might strive for in the coming months. On December 23, 2009, Liu Xiaobo tried to deliver a remarkable statement at his sentencing hearing, but was prevented from reading the full document. His prosecution became one of the Chinese authorities' most notable own goals by contributing to his selection the following year as the Nobel Peace Prize recipient, and his statement, "I have no enemies," served as the Nobel address. I'd like to read one of my favorite passages, because even while we can revel in the news of Liu Xia's safe arrival in Berlin, we still face so many challenges that people have enumerated this afternoon with respect to human rights abuses in China. At that time, Liu wrote, "I look forward to the day when my country is a land with freedom of expression, where the speech of every citizen will be treated equally well, where different values, ideas, beliefs, and political views can both compete with each other and peacefully coexist, where both majority and minority views will be equally guaranteed, and where the political views that differ from those currently in power in particular will be fully respected and protected, where all political views will be spread out under the sun for people to choose from, where every citizen can state political views without fear, and where no one can under any circumstances suffer political persecution for voicing divergent political views. I hope that I will be the last victim of China's endless literary inquisitions, and that from now on no one will be incriminated because of speech." Within hours of the joyful news about Liu Xia came word of the 13-year sentence handed down to Qin Yongmin, who had violated no discernible law. Those cases briefly took our focus away from the terrifying and seemingly endless use of political education camps in Xinjiang, where hundreds of thousands of Uyghurs who have broken no laws are arbitrarily detained. Beijing offers no indication that it is ready to end the use of torture or ill treatment to tolerate genuine religious freedom, or dial back its all-seeing surveillance efforts designed to engineer a dissent-free society. In other words, Liu's ideals remain far from fulfilled. But here today are so many people who worked so tirelessly for individuals' releases, for recognition of China's grave abuses, for redress and justice and accountability. And so, as Liu also reminded us in that same speech, we fortunate survivors and anyone who lives outside the regime's metal bars must, each of us as an independent person, hold fast to the memory of the victims. To do anything less is to surrender the meaning of life, to sell one's personal dignity, and to lose sight of what it means to be a human being. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sophie. That cord is really dangerous. You gotta watch out for that. So we thought that Rabia Kadir, who works with the Uyghurs, and she is a Uyghur herself, was going to be joining us, but I'm not certain where she is. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to invite up our last speaker, Caleb Kostreva. He is actually one of our summer associates at 21 Wilberforce. I would like to give a massive shout out to our summer associates and have them wave if possible. Lily, Perun, Caleb, and Caitlin over there. They've done a tremendous job helping organize this event, and yeah, it would not have happened had it not been for them. So I'm really privileged to allow Caleb to come up here and have him speak. He is a rising senior at Howard Payne University in Texas, and so we also hope he comes back to DC after he graduates. But in the meantime, I would love to have him come up here and share a few words with you. So thank you, Caleb.
Thanks, Abby. So we gather here 1 year after the death of Liu Xiaobo. As we remember him and his advocacy, we also look to the plight of those still living. His widow, Liu Xia, until Tuesday, was unjustly imprisoned, and we celebrate her release. She was never officially charged with a crime, but her crime was loving a dissident. Under house arrest, she was restricted in her movements and communications and was languishing without proper access to medical care. Michael Castor, an advocate and researcher on human rights in China, tweeted this on Tuesday in response to Liu Xia's release, and his words ring true. He said, "The lesson here is that sustained international advocacy can still make a difference, even against a giant like China." This is why we are gathered here today, because we are encouraging our government. This fight must be pursued, it must be prioritized, and it is not in vain. Today, as hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of people around the world are behind bars because of what they believe, be it religious, political, or some other conscientiously held belief, we speak out in our freedom because to do anything less would be to misuse the privilege with which we have been bestowed. For me as a student, this means choosing a school that promotes academic freedom and diversity of belief. This means researching issues of belief and becoming educated on the policies that have unjustly placed these people behind bars. And while I study in security, Uyghur students studying abroad are being recalled to China for political re-education in camps that are full of inhumane treatment and brainwashing and torture and in many cases death. Students in universities across the United States have access to scholarship and resources that many people simply do not have easy access to. And these sources are at our fingertips. What will you do with them? I care about this issue because I believe that if I do not use the skills and opportunities available to me as a college-educated American, then I am wasting my time here. Students around the world are shaped by their education, and every powerful government in the world realizes how formative education is in the populations of their countries. In the United States, we value academic freedom, and I benefit from the ability to research for classes from a broad spectrum of ideologies, including those with which my professors and my government disagree. However, in China, this is simply not the case, and students the government fears are falling away from party lines are at severe risk. So we stand gathered here in front of the building that houses our government, some members of which have joined with us today, and we stand here calling for them to advocate for those who cannot, to do the same thing we are, to use their power and influence, to advocate for the prisoners of conscience in China who are unjustly detained under laws that suppress ideas and beliefs that President Xi's government fears. So we refuse to stand idly by while China continues to silence people who are brave enough to shed light on human rights abuses in China. And we refuse to sit in our comfort and let apathy chain us to inaction, because inaction enables Chinese prisons to detain innocent people. And we refuse to remain silent, because silence is a void where horrors are made free. So we echo Liu Xiaobo's steadfastness when he said, "I will calmly face the impending trial, with no regrets for my choices, and I will look forward, in hope, to tomorrow." So we look forward, in hope, to a day when prisoners of conscience is a thing of the past. But for now, we must fight for that ideal. We must pressure the Chinese government to free these innocent people. We must assert that the fear of ideas will only enslave China to darkness. And I will not leave here today and become chained by apathy to inaction. And I challenge you to continue fighting for this as well. Contact your member of Congress. Write a letter to a prisoner of conscience. Become educated on the issues. Pray for their freedom. And most importantly, engage with those around you to do the same. In fact, you can do something right now. I'm going to ask you to pull out your phone. This is 2018, you all have a phone. Pull it out, and I'm going to urge you to contact your representative to support House Resolution 750, which seeks to establish a prisoner of conscience day, which we heard about earlier today from members of Congress and others. So pull out your phone, open your browser. I'm going to give you a short link. It's bit.ly/change not chains. Once again, it's bit.ly/change not chains. And if you have one of the posters that we were handing out, it has the link right on it. It's a really simple thing. It's going to ask for a couple contact information, your address, that way it can generate who your representative is. Many of you already know who your representative is, and that's great. Contact them. Urge them to support House Resolution 750, which seeks to establish a prisoner of conscience day. And now I'm going to ask you to do one more thing. Lily, nope, never mind. We're not taking a picture. I do want to thank our partners in putting on this event. Amnesty International has been such a huge support on this, as well as Freedom House, China Aid, and the Lantos Foundation for Human Rights and Justice. They've all been a huge support. Also, I want to give a special thanks of gratitude to the Baptist World Alliance, who provided the sound system. It's been amazing. Thank you all so much for coming and showing your support for prisoners of conscience in China, and I truly hope that your action on this issue continues. And I want to leave you with this powerful statement from Albert Einstein. He said, "Those who have the privilege to know have the duty to act." You know. You came here today. You have no right to say that you did not know. You know. So act. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Caleb, and thank you all for coming out today. Actually, I am going to ask everybody if y'all are willing to grab a photo of one of the prisoners of conscience that we have. Lou is here and she can hand them out, because we would like to take a group photo of everybody holding one of the pictures of a prisoner, just to know, so that they know that they're remembered, and people in China might see that they're remembered. So we're going to gather up here at the front, and then, yeah, I think, who's taking the picture? Lily?
Lily, come
okay.
way up. Way up. Come on, guys. Come on in. Gather up. Bunch up. Bunch up.